Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be talking about my plans for NaNoWriMo 2016. So it's been a while since I've updated y'all on my writing. I believe the last video that I posted was my second writing vlog, which was right before Camp NaNoWriMo in July. And the real reason that I haven't given y'all an update since then is because I kind of burnt out near the beginning of July when writing my story. I didn't feel like my writing was really up to the par that I wanted it to be, and I found myself really discouraged while writing, so I put my story down and I haven't touched it again since then. It's definitely something that I do plan to pick up again because, like I've said in many past videos, I've spent a ton of time with this novel. I think I just realized that I have spent a little bit too much time with this novel and I needed to step back and take a break from it. So that's what I've been doing ever since mid-July. And because of that, I really had zero plans to participate in NaNoWriMo this year because A, I'm a grad student and I am also working part-time, so I have a not crazy schedule, but I have a fairly busy schedule. And B, like I said, I had put my novel down and I really haven't had the urge to pick it up again because I felt like I needed space from it. But then about a week ago, I was going through some old files on my laptop and I came across this story that I worked on several years ago. And the more that I read through old outlines and the more that I reread little excerpts, the more I kind of found myself really wanting to dive back into the story, and then I found myself kind of thinking about writing it for NaNoWriMo 2016. And I was extremely hesitant to actually commit to writing the story and to participate in NaNoWriMo, both because of my schedule and for a couple reasons that I'll get to in just a minute. But eventually I just decided to go for it, so I will be participating in NaNoWriMo this year. So the main reason that I was a little bit iffy about whether or not to write this story is actually tied to the premise of the story, so I'll go ahead and talk about it a little bit for you guys. So essentially, I think that I first started the very, very rough version of the story back in middle school, sometime around maybe 7th grade, and it started out as a Jonas Brothers fanfic. I was a huge Jonas Brothers fan back in like 6th through 8th grade, and of course, since I loved writing, I ended up writing a fanfiction about the Jonas Brothers. Like pretty much all of my stories, this was left unfinished at one point and then picked back up again, this time kind of changing around the characters and changing some of the plot points to make it a little bit less cheesy. So the story, like I said, started as a Jonas Brothers fan fiction, and I wrote a fairly sizable chunk of it before eventually setting it down in 8th grade or sometime around there. Then over the years, I've kind of sporadically picked it up and changed certain elements, so now they're completely fictional characters. The boy band in the story is no longer the Jonas Brothers, but still a family of musicians. And so there have definitely been some elements that I have tweaked and changed over the years, but it's still what I would consider to be a very cheesy, cliche, Quizilla-esque fan fiction type story. So needless to say, this is kind of outside of my normal realm of reading and writing, and it's also basically still a fan fiction, and I consider it to be way too cheesy or cliche to ever get published or to do anything with it. So this is why I was very, very conflicted about whether or not to write it for NaNoWriMo. Because while I do definitely think it is very cliche and cheesy, I kind of love that aspect to it. I kind of love that it is this very, like I said, Quizilla-esque fanfiction story that is just full of melodramatic silliness and cliches, and it's just so cheesy, but I love it that way. The fact that it's so cliche and melodramatic makes it really fun to write, but it also makes me a little bit wary to write it for NaNoWriMo because I'll be devoting a lot of time this month to writing this and to writing 50,000 words, and it's probably not something that I will ever get published. So I felt really conflicted about this because on the one hand, it's a very cliche and stereotypical and dramatic story, which is really fun to write, but on the other hand, it's kind of that so much so that, like I said, it's something that I don't think I could ever publish. So I already know what some people are probably going to say, something like, it's probably not that cliche, it could still be published, you are your own worst critic, and while I wholeheartedly agree, I also tend to think of myself as very self-aware, and I know that this is just so ridiculous and so, like I've said many times, Quizilla fanfic-esque. So like I said, because of all these aspects, I'm very aware that this is something that I will probably never publish, or if I do publish it, it'll be something that I maybe post on my blog once it's all done. I don't know, but this is mostly, this NaNoWriMo, a pet project for me. It's something to kind of get me back into writing, and writing in a really fun way. Because I've participated in NaNoWriMo 2014, and I attempted to participate in Camp NaNoWriMo in 2015, and then Camp NaNoWriMo in 2016, and I have not gotten through it every single time. And part of that is because when I am working on this novel that I've been working on for several years, I'm very overly critical about my writing style and about my word choice, whereas when writing this kind of silly fanfic-esque story, I am not really critical of that, and I kind of just let the words flow from my brain. I do have an outline, and I do definitely know where I want the story to go, but it allows me to be a little bit less critical of myself, which is really what I need if I'm ever going to succeed in a NaNoWriMo or a Camp NaNoWriMo. So now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, I'm going to talk about my story a little bit. So essentially the main character of the story is a girl named Caitlin, who is a high school junior and lives in a small town. Her best friend is obsessed with this boy band, which I really cleverly renamed to the Landis Brothers. And Caitlin has this huge crush on her best guy friend that she's known her whole life. So the small town that she lives in is actually a small suburb of Dallas, and one day her best friend starts gushing to her about how the Landis brothers announced that in order to get away from all the media attention, they would be moving to a small town near Dallas. And of course, her best friend is completely convinced that that small town is the town that they live in, while Caitlin is a lot more skeptical, until they move in next door to her. Now, Caitlin is kind of the opposite of her best friend in the fact that she really is not into pop music at all, and in fact, the bigger the teenage following of a musician, the more likely she is to kind of hate that musician. So of course, when this boy band moves in next door, she wants absolutely nothing to do with them. And that's kind of where I'll leave the synopsis off. Like I said, it's incredibly cliche. You can already tell from the description that it is very cliche fanfic, and it's full of like super dramatic stuff and lots of fights and lots of romance, and it's just ridiculous. But like I said, that's what makes it fun, and that's why I'm super excited to write the story. And my plan before NaNoWriMo was to go ahead and write an outline for the story, but I actually ended up finding an outline that I wrote a few years ago, and I actually still kind of enjoy the way that the story goes in that outline, so I actually found myself already starting to write the story. Like, I started writing a little bit on Saturday, and by Sunday afternoon I already had 2,000 words, so I'm thinking it's not going to be too hard for me to do well in NaNoWriMo this year. That being said, I'm trying both to keep my excitement up, but trying not to jump the gun too much so that I still have enough material to write the story once NaNoWriMo actually comes around. So that kind of touches on all the points that I wanted to hit for this video. I'm doing NaNoWriMo this year. I'm really excited about it. I told you a little bit about my silly story that I'm writing, and I'm really excited about it. Like I said, I think that this NaNoWriMo will just be a really refreshing chance for me to write without judging my writing too much, which is really, I think, what I need right now. I went to the NaNoWriMo forums with that whole conundrum that I had about writing a story that would never be published, and I got some really great feedback from a lot of people who reminded me that not all of my writing needs to be published, and I can always write for myself, and sometimes that's the most rewarding thing to do. And that was really helpful for me because as someone who is very busy and has a lot of work that has to be done most of the time, I find myself feeling like I'm wasting my time writing unless it's for a project that I plan to do something with. But I also have to remind myself that I spend a lot of time watching YouTube and playing video games and watching TV shows and movies, and that I don't feel like I'm wasting my time doing fun things like that, so I shouldn't feel like I'm wasting my time writing a project that is just for fun and just for me, or perhaps just for my blog. And I guess that can kind of be like a writing tip for this video, is that while writing to be published is great, sometimes, or maybe even a lot of the time, you just really need to sit down and write for fun for yourself and not be critical of yourself. So yeah, as far as keeping up with what I'm doing in NaNoWriMo this year, Twitter is probably a good spot because I'm on Twitter a lot. My NaNoWriMo page will also be linked down in the description or in the cards, and that's probably where I'm going to be updating my word count as well. I'm definitely not going to be doing any sort of daily updates in video form for NaNoWriMo because doing NaNoWriMo itself is already a bit of a time crunch for me as a really busy grad student, so I will not be updating daily, but I may do a video in the middle of the month or maybe sometime at the end of the month after NaNoWriMo is done. So like I said, the two best places to keep up with what I'm doing are Twitter and my NaNoWriMo page. And feel free to add me as a writing buddy on there if you want to. I know that I could use some motivation because I'm one of those people that has a really hard time forcing myself to do things that I don't want to do. And so sometimes if I'm not in the mood to write, I will find myself not writing for several days, and that is not conducive to winning NaNoWriMo. Let me know down in the comments if you are also planning on participating in NaNoWriMo this year and how excited you are. Another quick plug for my Specialis Revelio blog where I analyze Harry Potter chapter by chapter. A link to that will be up in the cards and down in the description. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! And Caitlin also has this huge... Yeah?